So, good afternoon, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. I hope that you're all safe and well and enjoying your day so far. I'd like to thank Professor Mbaye and Duke University for giving me the opportunity to participate in the conference today by talking to you all about the life of Hajj Daoud Haroon. After discussing it with Professor Mbaye, we decided to change my topic to a simpler topic, a brief overview of Hajj Haroon's life. I have a lot of ground to cover in my allocated time, so without further ado, I'd like to start off by giving you a little background of myself and how I came to know Hajj Haroon as he was most commonly known. I'm a Scottish convert to Islam. I embraced Islam in 1996 when I was 26. I was raised as a Roman Catholic, although by my teenage years, I had become what you would call an agnostic. Through friends of mine who are Muslim and the discussions we would have, I decided to come to know Islam as a religion more closely, which eventually led to my conversion. My main access to information about Islam came from my friends and also from the local library, which had an extensive section on Islam. I believe I entered into Islam being fairly well read and with what I feel was a balanced understanding of the wide spectrum that the religion of Islam can encompass in terms of diversity and cultural manifestation. As I grew to understand and come to know the religion of Islam in a more comprehensive way, I explored many of its paths. As you all probably know, there are many different kinds of Islam. As things unfolded for me, I explored the various Sufi orders and paths, which would eventually lead me to come into contact with Hajj Haroon. Hajj Haroon was involved with a group of Sufis of which I had some association with in the UK, and it's through that association that Hajj Haroon's email came into my possession. A stream of emails followed, and as I slowly started to come to know Hajj Haroon, I realized that he was speaking from a much deeper place of understanding than I had come across so far. So in 2008, we hatched a plan to meet at a spiritual gathering being held in South Africa. Oh, this is Hajj Haroon at the gathering. We spent the weekend together, and by the end of the weekend, we had hatched another plan to visit Cape Town, facilitated by my host at the time, to visit the Muslim saints of Cape Town. An account of this trip can be found in Hajj Haroon's article, The Karamats of Cape Town. This is a picture of me with Nusra Qasim and also with Hajj Haroon at the shrine of Sheikh Nur al-Mubin in Cape Town. We had an incredible time together, and this became the start of a deep and meaningful relationship that would last for many years. What followed after the trip was a pen pal type relationship, mostly via email and occasionally by phone. What I discovered from being in his company was that he was not only a remarkable man, but a man of many talents, many lives, and many stories. So in those first few years, we hatched even more plans. I became the coordinator and gatherer of all of his written works with the view to have them published as a book entitled Man in the MOSAIC. We also started to create an online presence. I put together a website for him, mancibomosaic.com, and we created a Facebook page, and together we slowly started to gather all of his many written works, materials, and memorabilia, and started to document his life as a musician and also his life experiences and spiritual observations. Through our continued communication online and by reading his writings, I really came to know Hajj Haroon more and more and on many different levels. In my pursuit to find a spiritual teacher, I inadvertently found Hajj Haroon, who would become a guide for me in so many aspects of my life. His advice and wisdom came from a place that was universal and wasn't tied to any particular school of thought, law, or even religion. His lessons and guidance were shared freely as a friend and as an elder. Being older than me and having already walked so many of the paths that lay before me, his wisdom was invaluable, guiding me through the difficult challenges of my own path. He was a true seeker in every sense, and he was somebody who tried to keep his book open, the pages blank, waiting for the next entry to be written. Open-minded and open-hearted, I am truly grateful to have been part of his life, and he is dearly missed. May God bless his soul eternally. Ameen. So now to the life of Hajj Haroon. Here's a picture of Hajj Haroon with his wife Mujiba and their children. Hajj Haroon was born John Mancibo Lewis in 1934 in Boston, where his family had moved from South Carolina. Here's a family photo taken in 1904. His grandfather, William Thomas, seated to the far right against the railing, was born into slavery around the year of 1860, 5 years before the end of the American Civil War. His great-grand-uncle Francis Thomas, seated in the middle far left, was a well-known musician who graduated from the New England Conservatory of Music in 1902. He went on to receive his master's degree in liturgical music from the University of Chicago in 1910. He wrote the alma mater for the all-white Columbia High School 50 years before they even allowed Black people to attend the school. Hajj Haroon believes that they are still singing the alma mater to this day. Whilst living in Boston, Hajj Haroon learned much about life as a young lad. He was, in his own words, a typical street waif, wearing the cap, the scarf, the knickers, and high-top sneakers, getting into all sorts of trouble. This is a picture of Hajj Haroon playing the drum at home. As he grew up in Boston, his lifelong interest in music, history, and religion started to unfold. His mother, Vida, worked the door of an after-hours club, Mother's Lunch, where Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Louis Armstrong, Billie Holiday, Coleman Hawkins, Cab Calloway, and many others would perform. She would often take him as a child to work where these legendary musicians would perform. So from a very young age, he was engulfed in an environment that would set the foundation and shape of his musical journey. His spiritual life. Hajj Haroon had a very keen interest in spirituality. He was a practitioner of yoga and Tai Chi and always engaged with people from different backgrounds on various topics related to the human condition and spirituality. This is a picture of him seated with his Tai Chi teacher, Mr. Wang. This is a picture of Swami Bhaktivedanta, of whom Hajj Haroon was an associate for some time and even helped the Swami set up his first ashram in New York. But Islam was to become Hajj Haroon's spiritual path of choice. As a young lad in Boston, he became very close to a friend of the family, Mr. Ali Musa, a proud Somali man who had grown up on a pearl fishing boat on the Arabian Sea before he jumped ship in Boston Harbor. Mr. Musa introduced Hajj Haroon to the basics of Islam, and from his article Flow of Barakah, Hajj Haroon writes, "I did not convert to Islam from Christianity or any other religion. A better description of what happened to me may be described as an Islamic absorption. No shahada was ever given and none was ever requested. My shahada came about as a result of a natural sequence of events that I have come to realize as an endless flow of barakah or blessings. This may sound strange, but it is quite true, considering that neither of my parents were practicing Christians and were not members of any church. As a matter of fact, my mother had told me many times during my childhood that she had no respect for institutional religion and no respect for ministers or preachers. You can see what I've described as comparable to being in a spiritual vacuum. I've often considered that vacuum an indication of God's blessing because it was into that early childhood vacuum came an unsuspecting African traveler by the name of Ali Musa. His birth name was Hussein Ali bin Musa, and his people were known in the Horn of Africa as Adam Madoba. Hajj Haroon's awakening to Islam would continue to take place on the streets of Boston. Hajj Haroon knew Malcolm X and would often go to listen to him give his discourses on the street corners. Following in Malcolm's footsteps, Hajj Haroon would also embrace mainstream Islam in the 1960s and would also perform the pilgrimage to Mecca, incidentally with the son of Elijah Muhammad Warith, who by this time had also embraced mainstream Islam. This is a picture of the Hajj group before they left America, taken in the airport, and you can see Hajj Haroon slap back in the middle there, smiling, holding everybody, and also you can see in the top left-hand corner, smiling Warith Muhammad. This pilgrimage was documented by Hajj Haroon with his camera and is, as far as I'm aware, the first photographic documentation of the Hajj by a Westerner. A link to his photos and the account of the pilgrimage can be found on his website under the title Hajj 1967. This photo of the Kaaba was taken by Hajj Haroon on that trip. Hajj Haroon would eventually move to New York, and there he would become involved with the Islamic Mission of America with Sheikh Daoud Faisal. The picture of the Sheikh there. The Islamic Mission was to become one of the most important centers for the establishment of Islam in the USA and the most influential American-born Islamic organizations to have ever existed. This is a picture of the mission. Here, Hajj Haroon would help and assist the Sheikh in many of the day-to-day runnings of the mission, and the Sheikh was to become Hajj Haroon's spiritual mentor, father, and faithful friend for many years. Here we have a picture of one of the meetings of the Islamic Mission, and as you can see on the right end of the table is Sheikh Daoud with his aide-de-camp, Hajj Haroon. Hajj Haroon has written an extensive article on the Sheikh and his involvement with the Islamic Mission and can be found on his website under the title A Tribute to Sheikh Daoud Faisal. A recent website documenting the Islamic Mission, theislamicmission.com, has used Hajj Haroon's article as part of their vast archive, documenting this historically important center. Haroon's search and exploration of the spiritual path would continue throughout his life. Later on, he would eventually embrace the path of the Ahlul Bayt, the people of the house. He would leave the majority Sunni path to walk the path of what is commonly known as the Shia path. But I would like to offer at this point that Haroon was not a fan of defining himself by the common definition of others. He would often share with me that he wasn't even sure he would define himself as a Muslim. For if you understand what that truly means to be in submission to God, then he wasn't even sure that if he was that. He would spend time with the Shia community learning its ways, and this would eventually lead him to give a presentation in Iran at the first World Conference on the Ahlul Bayt in 1990. And here's a photo of Haroon taken at the Tehran University. Also in 1990, Haroon would take up interfaith dialogue work and become the founder of the Avicenna Library in the Islamic education in Houston, Texas, and serve as its librarian for a decade. In this time, he also instituted the Islamic education series and outreach programs that would greatly impact prison systems across the USA. He would continue to be active in this community, where he would often give the Friday sermon at the Islamic Ahlul Bayt Association of Triangle, an organization located and serving Muslims in the Triangle area of North Carolina. Despite his own path, he was not sectarian in any way. He would never discriminate others who walked different paths to his and was always fully embracing of others. Everyone was welcome and everyone was equal to him. His musical life. Here's a picture of Haroon playing conga for the godfathers of modern hip hop, the Last Poets. This was on the Channel 13 TV show Soul. From 1955, Haroon performed and recorded as a jazz trombonist and African and Middle Eastern percussionist. He has strong links with both traditional world music and the jazz avant-garde. He is listed in the International Who's Who of Music and Music Directory of Cambridge, England. His primary trombone instructor was Charles Connors, who played bass trombone with Duke Ellington and was in the famous Dizzy Gillespie band under the direction of Quincy Jones. He studied music theory and ensemble playing with Jackie Bayard, Roland Alexander, and Ken Makanda McIntyre, and many of the Boston-based musicians too numerous to list. He also had the good fortune to have played in the house bands that backed up artists like Jimmy Rushing and Billie Holiday. But it was under Ken McIntyre's mentorship and guidance that Haroon would really blossom as a musician. This partnership eventually culminated in the recording of the album Stone Blues for Prestige Records, recorded in 1960 at the infamous home of jazz, Rudy Van Gelder's Englewood Studios. There's a picture of the album. We also have a picture here of the rehearsals. Downbeat magazine gave this album 4.5 stars out of 5, and in their review said, McIntyre's alto playing is the main show. However, his blistering style is handsomely complemented by trombonist John Lewis's spare, warm, essentially legato approach. All in all, this album is thoroughly enjoyable and consistently rewarding. Haroon often would play with Ken McIntyre in the infamous 5 Spot in New York. Here we have them both together on stage. And he would also make several recordings with Ken McIntyre for the infamous Blue Note label from 1962 to 1963. Unfortunately, these recordings were not released at the time, but would eventually see the light of day in 1994 under the title Ken McIntyre, The Complete United Artist Sessions. That's a picture of the cover there. Haroon would go on to perform and record with the jazz avant-garde of the 60s and the 70s. Names such as Ronnie Boykins, Sun Ra's bass player, Errol Cross, Sam Rivers, Ron Carter, Roland Alexander, Jackie Bayard, Ahmed Abdul Malik, Bilal Abdul Rahman, Hakim Jami, to name just a few. Haroon documented much of his musical adventures in his writings, within which you will hear firsthand accounts of seeing jazz greats such as Charlie Parker, John Coltrane, Billie Holiday, Henry Red Allen, Max Roach, Clifford Brown, and even a New Year's Eve spent with Charlie Mingus. His educational life. Haroon also pursued an academic life that would lead him to become a teacher of many subjects. In 1970, Haroon entered Wesleyan University, Connecticut as a student instructor in the music department, where he would eventually receive his Bachelor of Arts degree in music. It was during his years at Wesleyan that he became interested in ethnomusicology and began to explore many types of music, particularly the music of Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. In this picture here, we see Daoud Haroon behind his master Adzendia and his teacher and guide during his years at Wesleyan University from 1970 to 1975. He began to explore the use of music as a healing modality or music therapy, and also the interrelationship of indigenous music, particularly the evolution of African American music from its African sources and the development of music in the African diaspora. While at Wesleyan, he was instrumental in helping to develop the jazz studies component and served briefly in 1973 to 1974 as the artist in residence in the African American music. So we have a small aside here. This is a picture of Haroon with Ernest Dickinson. Haroon is the uncle of Ernest, and this, as you know, probably Ernest Dickinson is the cinematographer famous for his works with Spike Lee. Ernest recalls, "When I was about 14, my uncle, El Hajj Daoud Haroon, became artist in residence at Wesleyan University. He's a jazz musician, but whilst there, he took photography classes. He used to produce some of the most beautiful black and white prints, and that was my first spark of interest into photography for me." And here we have one of those lovely black and white photos. So Haroon would end up teaching music at Wesleyan and also other colleges and universities over the years. He traveled the world extensively doing musicological and theological research in Morocco, South Africa, Senegal, the Gambia, the UK, the Caribbean, Canada, Pakistan, Iran, Arabia, and he traversed the USA from north to south and east to west. Haroon obtained a master's degree in history from the Texas Southern University, Houston, with a concentration in techniques of oral history and colonial American history. He also taught American history in the Houston Community College system in the 80s and 90s, including his alma mater, Texas Southern University. After retiring from teaching, his interest in the intersections of music, social justice, and religion continued, as did his travels, visiting the Middle East and Africa. He also continued to perform and participate in various ensembles, including the African American Dance Ensemble. And here we can see a photo of Haroon from the 2013 American Dance Festival Annual Musicians Concert at Duke University. In 2014, he was made a Fellow of the United Artists of America, which took him back to Africa again to pursue his studies in ethnomusicology. Haroon told Frank Stasio of WNC's The State of Things that music doesn't discriminate. It reverberates throughout the heavens and has permeated everything we know. So to finish up, Haroon was a teacher to many, not just in the educational systems, but also within his own personal life and communities. I know that I am just one of many personal students that he adopted. There are many like me whom he guided and helped in his lifetime. Yet he also believed that he understood his own place in the universe. And in his own words, he spent a lifetime trying to make sense out of nonsense. So thank you for that. I know it was a little bit quick, but I tried to cram so much of his life in there. I hope you gained something from my presentation. Most of the material that was used is available on his website, mancebomosaic.com. The majority of his written works still remain unpublished, so if any of you feel that you might be able to assist in helping me to get them published, please get in touch with the website. Thank you so much for your time. Assalamu alaikum.